virtual AHP Faculty Testbed Virtual Showcase. We had hoped to have this event in London, but obviously, for obvious reasons, we've had to do it virtually. So I think actually that means that more people will be able to join us this morning. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Paula Breeze, and I'm incredibly privileged to be working with the Health Education England team, the national team, as one of their clinical fellows. And my project for this year has been to set up the AHP faculty testbeds across the country. Could I just ask you please to mute yourselves if you're not speaking? That's all right, just because we've got a little bit of background noise. So a very warm welcome to you. For those of you that are on Twitter, we've got a hashtag, hashtag AHP Faculty. And unless anybody has an objection, if you wanted to do any screen grabs and to take photographs of the slides or the presenters, then I think we've all given our consent for that. So if that helps with you sending tweets, then that's great. But please do be active during the session. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what are we here for? So today we're here to celebrate we're here to celebrate the work of our 24 AHP testbeds, and I think it's really pertinent to perhaps take a minute to just think about that for a minute, because this testbed project started back in November 2019, which feels like an awfully long time ago, but it actually wasn't. And in the space of 7 months, and whilst we've been endured a global pandemic, we have still been able to put on a showcase event just 7 months later, where we now have a whole community of AHPs who have set up faculties and who are really active and have made some really positive progress. So I know we're all rushing between meetings, Zoom meetings, and we're just all working flat out. So let's just have a deep breath and just congratulate ourselves. I've been absolutely honoured to work with the people that have been involved in this testbed project, and I think the achievements that you have made in such a short space of time, whilst COVID's been going on, is pretty phenomenal. So at this point, I would probably ask you to give yourselves a clap, but because we can't, then just give yourselves a pat on the back, because it's no mean feat. So we're here to celebrate that. We're here to promote the impact that the testbeds have had, share and learn between ourselves, but also beyond. And I'm hoping that there's quite a few people on the call today who have not set up a testbed, AHP faculty yet, but who are interested in doing so. And we really want to inspire and motivate you today to consider joining us on that journey. And we want to provide some time to reflect and consider how the AHP faculties can support AHP recovery and growth. Got some noise that sounds like somebody's doing the hoovering. Thank you. Next slide, please, Sharon. So just some housekeeping. So if you can keep yourselves on mute, please. The webinar is being recorded, so you can share it with colleagues afterwards. If you can switch off your cameras, then I think it just helps with the signal, etc. And the way we're going to run this is, rather than people keep putting their hands up, if you can put any comments or questions that you have in our chat box, then we will have an opportunity shortly, towards the end of the session, for discussion and questions. Okay, next slide, please. So what we're going to cover today. So I've given you a brief introduction. I'm delighted to be able to hand you over to Suzanne in a minute, who is going to set the scene for us and give you some of her insights. We will then have a brief overview of what an AHP faculty is. Then we'll hear from 2 of our AHP faculty testbeds that have been beavering away and have produced some excellent work. So we'll hear from them. We're then going to hear from our evaluation partners, which is really exciting because they've got some fantastic findings to share with us this morning. You'll then be pleased to know you can have a 10-minute comfort break, but obviously the joy of being in this setting is that you can have a comfort break whenever you like. But we will be factoring one in at about 11:15. Then we will have 3 more presentations from 3 of our AHP faculties before we have our question and discussion session. So please do put some feedback in the chat box and some questions. Then we'll have a brief summary of our learning and how we can continue the journey before Beverly Harden will close and provide us with her summary. So we've got a lot to get through. It's a very exciting morning. I'm delighted to have you all here, and I'm now equally as delighted to hand you over to Suzanne Rastrick.
Thanks, Paula, and good morning again, colleagues. It's really a delight to be amongst, I can see, north of 120 AHP colleagues this morning. So thank you for sparing the time to join us, and I hope that you find it really helpful. I guess from my perspective, I've been involved in this pretty much from the get-go, as Paula has. And I think what has been a great joy is actually seeing how things have developed over time. On one of my last sets of clinical visits during February to the Northwest, I was actually involved in the launch of the Cheshire and Merseyside Faculty testbed. And I think the issue from my point of view was really thinking at that point, that was the 4th of February, about what was that meaning. Clearly the pandemic was, not even particularly known to us at that point. Obviously, we were aware of it in China, but we didn't know the implications it would have for us and the changes that we as professionals would make. And I guess for me, one of the things I always say to all of us is that change is one certainty in our careers. I guess we would never have expected to have seen that escalation, but the resourcefulness which you have all displayed and shown makes me incredibly proud. So I think really well done in terms of not just, the subject matter we're talking about this morning, but actually in terms of your leadership and your professional practice during this time. It's been much appreciated by me. And I think one of the other interesting changes that the pandemic has brought to us, from my perspective, is the demand that we have created for allied health, which these faculties actually help to serve in terms of that pipeline and supply in our workforce. It's really important now that we really continue to build on that, because what the emphasis I'm seeing is hitherto the emphasis on allied health, for example, in intensive care was not great, aside perhaps from respiratory physiotherapy, but the demands for imaging in terms of diagnostic radiography, clearly our ADP colleagues, our paramedic colleagues, but also particularly thinking about dietetics, speech and language, and increasingly occupational therapy too. So that we're now doing a piece of work nationally with the National Clinical Director for ITU, thinking about AHP capacity in ITU. But also I've been reappointed as the National Clinical Director for Rehabilitation, as many of you will know. And there's a real emphasis again on not just the post-COVID rehab, but thinking about that 4-country statement that I helped author, setting out the other determinants of rehabilitation for those who've been affected by the pandemic, the lockdown, those who perhaps have suffered some trauma, orthopedic or neurological incident during this time and require rehabilitation, and those who've got long-term conditions who've been affected. And clearly the bulk of the workforce who deliver those services are our people, they're AHPs. And then clearly coming, we've also got the reset of primary care. There's the new GP contract where we've secured both physiotherapy and paramedic colleagues in the first instance. And then clearly we've also secured now dietetics and occupational therapy. So the demand for many of our professions has never been higher. And I'm hugely proud of all of your work to help achieve that interest and desire for allied health services. So going back to why we're here today, the AHP faculties were introduced to really facilitate that system-wide collaboration between health and care providers and our educational colleagues. And we're going to hear, as Paula has said, from established AHP faculties and researchers to provide a sort of 360-degree overview of the impact of these faculties and their potential future impact. And that's what I'm really interested in, given that demand that I've just described for our services. So COVID-19 has impacted on our AHP workforce supply, and it's never been more important that systems work together, either in your STPs as they move into integrated care systems, or thinking about a regional geography too, to work together to really develop your recovery and growth plans. And the AHP faculties provide the infrastructure to make this happen. So I've got absolute complete belief that working collegiately across local systems, including all 14 professions, and I absolutely emphasise that, this isn't just a game for our larger professional groups where we know we've got big numbers to deliver. This is actually about giving a hand up to prosthetics and orthoptics, some of our smaller and more exquisite professions in terms of numbers. They need that collegiality from you to support them too. So it's really vital that whether it's work experience, student placements, retention or apprenticeships, we all continue that hashtag that we often use on Twitter of hashtag stronger together. Thanks so much. Paula.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's fantastic. Thank you. It's lovely to have you with us, and thank you for setting that scene. So for those of you that are not familiar now with what an AHP faculty is, I'm going to just describe that to you briefly. And as Suzanne said, it is actually a vehicle to allow us to, one vehicle to allow us to deliver our interim people plan and commitment across England. Next slide, please. So Suzanne has already mentioned that the AHP faculties were mentioned in the interim people plan as a way of allowing us to work together to expand our clinical placement activity. But faculties have got so much more potential. It's not just about one particular workforce issue and supply issue. We are actually able to use that faculty and that network of people to help us to shape the next generation of AHPs and to continue the education and training of our existing AHPs, as well as developing advanced practice. So there's a whole range of potential that we can utilise the faculties for. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Sharon. So the project that I undertook as part of my clinical fellowship started around November last year, and what we did was we put an ask out to all of our STP ICS systems to see if they wanted to bid for some money to set up their own AHP faculty, and we were delighted to receive 28 applications. And we actually had 24 test beds who were successful and who are now up and running. We originally planned to have 7, but it just goes to show you the appetite out there for the desire to work better together and more collaboratively across systems is really, really present. So we've got 24 test beds that are now live and thriving. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so what is an actual faculty? Well, an AHP faculty, I think the term faculty does have connotations with academia, etc. But in this case, it is basically bringing together a group of organisations that formally work together across an ICS STP to support and deliver a collective approach, okay, to whatever that AHP supply, demand, workforce issue happens to be. So I usually, for those of you that have heard me present on this before, I usually use the analogy of the AHP faculty being the engine room of the AHP Council. And that is usually sort of a Star Trek analogy. But today I'd like to just give a shout out to Gareth Cornell. I'm not sure if Gareth's with us today, but he's recently joined the South Yorkshire and Basset Law AHP faculty, and he helped me to, he described an AHP faculty in terms of a house. Now I know Suzanne often talks about the architecture and the infrastructure, and I suppose that does lend itself quite nicely to thinking about a faculty in terms of a house. Now, before anybody gets upset about the fact that we've put the return to practice in the laundry room, I'd just like to point out that that is by no means a reflection of what I think of return to practice. It's literally, this is all not meant to be taken literally. And in many households, the laundry room is probably the busiest room in the house. And it's just because it was a small room and we had 3 letters. So please, I hope that doesn't cause offence. It's not intended to. But basically, the house, the infrastructure, brings some stability and some security and a space to house our AHP workforce activity and transformation. The house or the faculty can accommodate several work streams at the same time. So you might be working on clinical placements in one sector, in one part of the faculty, careers activity in another, apprenticeships in another. And it provides us with space and time to focus on our priorities. But but the house is connected. So all of those pieces of work shouldn't be happening in silos. There are rooms, there are doors to the rooms. So clinical placements can collaborate with work experience, and they can all sit around a dinner table on a Friday evening and actually share examples of good practice. They can connect, they can innovate, they can come up with new, fresh ideas. And I think I quite like the idea of us AHPs actually having this house, having this infrastructure in which to do all this fantastic work that we're doing. It gives us an identity that we don't always have in the system, and it allows us to have that sustainability and that shelter and a place. So that's how I am perceiving an AHP faculty. You might come up with your own analogies. Next slide, please. So where do these AHP faculties sit in the bigger picture? So in the structure of our ICS's STPs, the faculty in most cases would report into the AHP Council, and the faculty membership would usually involve our AHP providers, our universities, and becoming more and more common, we would want to see people from our private and voluntary sector, from primary care, from our social care partners, sat around that table having those really important conversations about how to increase our supply of AHPs. But that is a typical example of the infrastructure the governance structure of where a faculty sits. But as you will hear, that isn't always the case. There is room for flexibility depending on variations in systems. Next slide, please. So in the project, what Health Education England were looking for of our test beds, and the term test bed is used as another word for pilot, if you like. What we were looking for was for people to actually establish a faculty, to actually build that house, to actually get that membership, the terms of reference, and agree a purpose and where it sits within the bigger system. We wanted them to demonstrate quality improvement methodology. We wanted them to pick a project, an AHP workforce project that was pertinent and a priority for them. So that might be around clinical placement expansion or apprenticeships or work experience. And we wanted them to analyse some of the data, so collect some data, analyse it, demonstrate an impact, and produce a final report with recommendations and next steps. So that is in a nutshell what an AHP faculty is. I'm now going to hand you over to the exciting bits, which is our actual test beds in action. So I'm going to hand you over to Helen Lycett now.
So good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me okay. I'm Helen Lycett. I'm the Trust Lead for Allied Health Professions at West London NHS Trust, and I am the Chair of the North West London AHP Faculty. And we decided as a faculty to focus on the expansion of clinical placements. Next slide, please. So why did we do this? So in London, I work in London, our faculty is in North West London, and we are particularly challenged in London in terms of our clinical placement capacity. We have a really large density of HEIs and providers, so there is a lot of competing demand for clinical placements. We often have students who want to come to London for specialist elective placements, so that creates additional demand. We also have really large challenges with recruiting and retaining AHPs in London, more so probably than some parts of the country, and that is for all sorts of obvious reasons, cost of living not least of the problems. And we recognise that students are a really good, important part of our pipeline into our workforce. So for us as a North West London faculty, it really became a bit of a no-brainer to focus on clinical placement capacity for our project. Next slide, please. So on this slide, when you can see it, I'm aware there's a bit of a time delay on the line. This outlines our objectives. Oh, the slides have gone completely. Not sure if that's an issue at my end. No, okay, they're back again. Apologies, some technical issues going on. So next slide, yes. So this slide here represents the objectives that we set out in our original project proposal as a North West London faculty. And I'm not going to go through these obviously individually because we'll be here all day, but essentially what we really wanted to try and do was understand both the barriers and the enablers to the expansion of clinical placements. So we wanted to try and gather some baseline data. We wanted to test some ideas in using PDSA quality improvement methodology to see if they worked in terms of improving placement capacity, and to see if those ideas would then scale across a system. Next slide, please. But ultimately, we wanted to provide some proof of concept around the AHP faculty and to try and understand and test if working collaboratively as opposed to in silos would yield greater results than us going it alone. And so that was kind of our overarching objective, as well as the actual nuts and bolts of our project. Next slide, please. So I am aware there is a time delay, but I'm just going to keep talking. So on this next slide, when you see it, you'll see the collection of organisations that are part of the North West London faculty, and how did we set that up? So in North West London, we already had an AHP council, which is made up of all of the NHS providers within North West London. And so the lead AHPs who sit on that council were asked to represent were asked to nominate a representative from their organisation to sit on the faculty. We then did a bit of a gap analysis to try and understand what organisations were not represented within the faculty. We realised very early that we had no social care representation, we had no representation from HEIs or indeed HEE, who we thought would be a very helpful partner in our venture. And so we used our networks to pull people in from those sectors, and this is the net result. These are the organisations now represented within our AHP faculty. So next slide, please. And then COVID came along and interrupted things somewhat, as I'm sure you can all appreciate. So we weren't able to focus on our project in quite the way we had originally intended, because COVID had interrupted service provision so greatly at this point. But what we did do was use the faculty as a shared space to share information and ideas about how we could continue to provide clinical placements during these really challenging times. So we continued to meet on a monthly basis and support each other and work as a group across the system to really think about how we could still provide those placements. We also used it as an opportunity to gather some data, so we did a bit of data collection and analysis across the North West London ICS to look at how many placements we'd offered and managed to deploy, and how many students we'd managed to deploy, to look at which providers had a really high demand for placements as opposed to some providers where not many names had come through on the portal, and see if we could share demand, and also just to give us a bit of a sense check of how we were doing, so we weren't working in the dark. And from the data we gathered, we managed to establish that as a North West London ICS, we were providing about 20% of the placements across London, which we didn't think was too bad, given our size and the challenges we were facing within our services. Next slide, please. So what's been difficult? A lot of these will resonate with you, I'm sure. So we've had some systemic issues in terms of deploying student placements over the last few months. The learning the system of using the HEE portal and all the challenges that came with that, because in London we usually use a system called the Placement Management Partnership, so that all changed for us very swiftly. We've had delays with HR onboarding processes. All of these I'm sure you can relate to. We've had issues with capacity. The inevitable challenge of trying to provide clinical placements when we've had huge amounts of AHPs redeployed, services shut, etc., etc. Capacity has been an enormous issue in terms of providing placements over the last 4 months. And finally, we've had challenges just in terms of uncertainty. So there's obviously we've not known what services are going to look like, and so it's been hard to plan for placements. There was uncertainty around the funding attached to the paid placement model, and when that was going to end, and therefore whether to onboard students or not. None of these things have helped our placement capacity, but we have managed to muddle through and still provide a fair proportion. The slides at my end appear to have frozen, but I'm hoping everybody can still see them. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to keep talking because I'm very mindful of time, but the slides do appear to have frozen at my end.
Okay, so Helen.
Okay,
Helen,
okay, thank you. That's good to know. So hopefully I'm now on to, you're now seeing a slide that is reflective of some of the successes and some of the things that have worked well with our faculty. So one of the things that's really helped is that we as a group have had a shared vision about the importance of supporting clinical placements, and that's for all of the reasons I stated at the start of the presentation. So that shared vision as a group has really helped galvanise us. There's been a huge amount of adaptability and flexibility, both with providers and with the HEIs over the last 4 months, in terms of changing the nature of clinical placements and thinking differently about what clinical placements need to look like, and in order to ensure that we are still able to provide placements in much changed services. And finally, just to say that it's really helped us forge strong relationships. I think I think COVID has really actually forced that probably quicker than it probably would have happened otherwise, particularly between providers and the HEIs. And I think it's really helped create a very authentic collaboration between providers and HEIs in terms of thinking about clinical placements and how they can be delivered in the current climate. Next slide, please. So next steps, where are we going from here? So we are going to bid for the HE money for clinical placement expansion, both as individual trusts and as a faculty. We really want to try and understand what good looks like, what is a good placement, particularly in the current climate and going forward. Placements we know are going to look different. What does good look like? And as a faculty, we absolutely intend to keep going. We don't intend to stop, and we're going to use it as a mechanism for looking at other aspects of workforce in relation to AHP challenges, apprenticeships, ACP, etc., etc. And then next slide, and then just my final slide. I really want to finish by saying that I think for us the most useful gain, other than being able to sustain some of our clinical placements over the last 4 months, really has been the relationships we've built as a faculty across all of the people who are part of that group. I really believe it is those relationships that are going to drive the real culture change we need to expand our clinical placement capacity. And for those from the North West London faculty who are on the line, and I know some of you are, I just as chair want to personally say a huge thanks to all of you. And then just finally, I'll put my contact details up on the last slide. So I'm really happy if anybody wants to get in contact with me with any questions about our faculty and what we've been doing. I'm really happy to speak to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. And just before we move on to our next presentation, please can I ask, just make sure that everybody is muted and has their cameras turned off, because I know we're having a few technical problems. Because can you believe we've got over 157 people on this call, which is absolutely incredible and fantastic, but it does mean that things are a little bit slow. So thank you so much, Helen, and I'm now delighted to pass you over to Suzanne Rastrick.
Thank you, Paula. Hi, my name is Suzanne Rastrick. I'm Deputy Director of Allied Health Professionals in Southern Health and currently the AHP STP Professional Lead for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Next slide, please. So where did we all start with this? Well, first of all, I thought it would be helpful for us to say a bit about who we are. So within Hampshire and Isle of Wight, we've had a council in place since spring 2018. And initially we did this very much through discretionary effort, with us all as professional leads from our organisations sort of meeting and trying to work together and carve out time in order to do that. As the start of that, we developed a place-based plan for AHPs and presented that to our local workforce board. We also did some work on ESR cleansing and making sure that we aligned. As a result of the work that we did in a proposal, we then did get a funded 1 day a week post for an AHP lead, which started in December 2019. And along with that, so Claire Mander is the main lead in this, who's currently off, so I'm taking over. Her first job was to apply for this faculty bed. Across our area, we have 3 acute hospitals, 2 community trusts, and then the Isle of Wight, which is a distinct trust of its own, which is obviously acute, community and mental health. The 2 community trusts have mental health as well as physical health services. Next slide, please. So the development of our faculty. Our faculty sits as part of our council and very much reports in as Paula's diagram showed. However, attendance at the faculty meeting is slightly larger than just the council. We have project leads and we also invite different professionals as appropriate. It's overseen by myself, the SDP lead, and it reports directly into our council, but also into the STP workforce team, so that we make sure there's a channel back to the STP about the work that we're doing. What we decided is that actually our faculty grew straight away, actually, and so it's become larger than just the test bed that we're doing here, that we're talking about here today. We were also successful in getting some funding from within the STP around leadership. So we decided that our faculty is almost the bed of where we do all of our development work, and any funding that we get comes into the faculty. Next slide, please. So this is our rather long title for our faculty test beds. So very different to a lot of the other faculty test beds, we decided to look at our workforce retention and development, and particularly wanted to look at our mental health and learning disability services. The mental health commitments in the long-term plan and our SDP workforce plans for mental health had a real priority to focus on the staffing. We were really clear that within our STP, our mental health AHP staffing had quite a low profile. We had a lot of AHPs that worked in quite isolated teams with a lack of joined up working, but also we felt there were staff out there that were working in teams that we didn't know were there as AHPs or had limited connections. And although on paper it looked like just 3 of our trusts would have AHPs in working towards mental health, we knew that within our social services they would also have some practitioners, as do some of our acute hospitals as well, where they might have dementia AHP leads. So we really wanted to use this piece of work to join all those staff together and to look at what career development and support we could offer them. Next slide, please. So we had 4 stages towards this project. The first was scoping phase, and this was really for us to conduct a deep dive into the mental health and learning disability workforce across our providers, looking at how many AHP staff did we have, what was the mixture of professions, what were the banding, and the idea of the banding was for us to look at what the different recruitment and retention opportunities and development opportunities were for those staff. And we also wanted to map what the different specialities were that we had staff in. The next stage was the setup phase, which is looking at us establishing a peer network for these staff. We were starting this initially with our advanced clinical practitioners and also our consultant practitioners. And it was really the aim of this was trying to inspire people to develop further into their roles. The next was the delivery phase, which unfortunately, as with most people, has been put back dramatically. This was going to start with a learning event in March 2020, but obviously we had to postpone, where we'd have approximately 150 of our AHPs working across these areas to get them together to look at what the different career development and opportunities were that they currently had, but also that they wanted to have in the future, so that we could then influence the work going into the STP. And it was also to then look at how we could embed supervision across our organisations to make sure that people were linked in and connected and had the support they needed. The 4th and final stage was around future-proofing our phase. The money that we bid for was also to provide some resources for virtual learning. So we were looking at providing some VR headsets and also some cameras that include the ability to vlog on them, so that we could actually share resources, share expertise, and be able to share it to different places. So, for example, one of the things that we were thinking we could look at is how could we explain to somebody who works in radiology in an acute hospital what it might be like for somebody with learning disabilities walking into their service, and how could we use technology to show that? Unfortunately, we haven't got that far yet. We've still got the ideas. Next slide, please. So this really just says what our development hopes were for for this. So we hope that as a result of this project, we would have a connected and engaged workforce. We really wanted to pull our AHPs in mental health back in and make sure that they felt really valued in their role. We also wanted to make sure they had the clear career progression and that we're inspiring the next generation. So the project was going to start to look at how we could use the technology to inspire students coming in and also work experience opportunities. The additional one that perhaps isn't on here as well is also how we use this project to inspire the rest of our workforce that might work in more of a physical health setting about the mental health, and actually that it's everyone's business as well, and how we could share that learning. Next slide, please. So the next slide is around our journey so far. As everyone has probably been in a similar situation, we slowed during the COVID process. We struggled initially to find the right project lead. We did get a brilliant project lead who is doing it, who's working for us, who's one of our trainee consultant practitioners within mental health. And she's doing a really great job. But as you can imagine, when COVID happened, she did get pulled to the front line. So, and the data that was required for her on staffing took a while to come in as well. So at the moment, we're at the stage where we have scoped what our staffing looks like. And we're looking at the next stage, which is doing a survey monkey with those staff, so we can give more of an information about what they feel and how they're doing. The engagement event that we hoped to have is hopefully happening in November. COVID dependent, we're obviously looking at the different opportunities and how we can deliver that. And certainly where we thought we'd only be able to have 150, as we've all got used to new developments like this, hopefully we'll be able to open it to a much wider number of staff. What the real bonus through this is that we did have a really strong council. So actually, despite COVID and the pressures, as a council, we did still support each other with regular connections and working together to make sure that although we didn't focus on this project, we did lead some of the other work that we had going on and that we supported each other to get through a tricky few months. What this project has also shown is that we needed to improve our engagement with our education providers. So we've really spent some time doing that over the last couple of months. The one thing that has started is the ACP forum, which has engaged across all the organisations. They've had one meeting and one future meeting already planned, but everyone is really positive that this would be a good support. Next slide, please. The next slide is just really a couple of complexities that we've gained during the scoping phase. Obviously, COVID-19 was one of them, so there was a delay in information. What we found is that within the council, we do have our NHS organisations that are the key ones that work within the Hampshire and IoW footprint, and we do have one of our local authorities. But what became very clear is that our connections with two of our city councils and also other organisations that provide services into the Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, we have less of a connection with. So we've started to build those connections now into that. The ability to get data is quite difficult. We did it through two different avenues. We did pull ESR data and then we asked services to scope themselves. What we have found is a disparity within that data that we need to go back and work through. We had done some work on ESR last year, but obviously there is further work for us to do. Some of the areas that I know from my own services that were particularly key on that is where art therapists sit. Sometimes they've ended up sitting in psychology rather than within the AHP umbrella. So it is us working through how do we manage that. It's also been quite interesting in the data looking at the differences in the trusts and what the organisations have. So for example, one trust has a lot more AHPs but of bands 5 and 6s, whereas another organisation has much more senior AHP staff in their mental health services. So it's looking at how do we marry that up and what does that look like. We need to compare some of the population sizes that the different organisations serve as well to look at whether they equal each other and whether there's a distribution that works. Next slide, please. So finally, what's next? Well, we still got quite a bit to do on our projects. As I said, we've got the Survey Monkey to do and the event and the getting of the equipment and actually the starting to use the equipment. So our first project is really to get the equipment out to the teams. We've got some people identified who are willing to try things. and we will try and get that up and running as soon as possible. The life of the faculty will certainly continue. We've got the leadership development programme that we've got as well, and we will also be bidding as a faculty for the HEE placement capacity increase. We're also looking at how we extend the attendance at our faculty meetings. We've got some clinical advisor roles coming in. We need to increase with our city council representation, but also our HEIs as well. So we've got a busy and exciting year ahead to really build and develop our faculties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanna. That's a fantastic presentation. So you've heard now from two of our AHP faculty test beds, and it's really encouraging that both of them have started on the journey, but it's by no means the end of the journey, and it sounds like the AHP faculty infrastructure is there to stay in those two systems, which is great news. We commissioned an evaluation of the project, and it seems a bit strange because a lot of the projects have paused. However, our evaluation partners at Anglia Ruskin University, Economics by Design, and RETHINK partners have done amazing things to develop and to adapt and be flexible around COVID to produce a really fantastic piece of evaluation, some really incredible insights that I'm sure you will find really helpful in whatever stage of your faculty development you are at, particularly those who are at the beginning of that journey. So I'm now delighted to hand you over to, we've got Irene Carson, Karen Hayden and Jax Malander, who are going to present our evaluation findings for you.
Hi, I'm Karen Hayden from Anglia Ruskin University, and as Paula said, we've also got Irene Carson and Jax Malander with us today. So we've been running the evaluation on the faculty test beds, and we're just going to run through today some of the findings on that. Next slide, please. So our evaluation, we looked at all the test beds together and used a mixed methods design. This included qualitative interviews and quantitative data that was available to us. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if everyone can see that slide. It's just appearing now. Okay. So the first thing we did was look at some of the faculty characteristics that we expect everyone to develop. And these are some of the key findings. So the faculties should be designed to provide a cost-effective means of coordinating AHP workforce development activities. So to achieve this, the faculties are expected to have this strong local governance structure knitted into your wider systems, which includes having leadership and engagement of the relevant local stakeholders. And to do this, you need this operating model built around PDSA or on equivalent quality improvement practice. And quite vitally, you need to be supported by strong data and information so that you can see the purpose of what, the project that you're taking on. So here you can see you've got the structure of ideally where a faculty sits, sometimes under an AHP council if that's in your faculty structure. So some of the solutions that you were asked to look at were the careers activity, apprenticeships, coordination expansion of clinical placements, return to practice and work experience. And as we said, this is all through a quality improvement system. Quite a lot have been looking at the PDSA cycle. So next slide, please. So there has been a lot of progress within the faculties. All 24 faculty test beds have been established, However, as we all know, this has been delayed kind of come mid-March. Everyone was kind of redeployed onto other things. So some faculties had structure in place already, others were still trying to get staff in place into the faculty to start on their projects. So this, you know, it really has stalled things for some places. Some of the progress that we're finding, so the differences between the faculties means, you know, you've got these large ecosystems and there's very many moving parts in the systems that have influenced your state of readiness and progress depending on the faculty and the areas that you're working in. So what we've done is we've looked through all the progress reports that you've been sending back to show us what you're doing, and we can see there has been a lot of progress with the inputs and processes in setting up the faculties and the projects. This varies across the faculties, again, depending on what areas you're looking at, because you're all so different and set up so differently according to your local structures. But as yet, because of this pause in a lot of the faculties, there haven't been any specific outputs or outcomes yet that we can measure. And you can see here just some of the activities that have occurred. So the operational characteristics that we've found is that overall the faculties have been aligning very well to the expectations of how we expect you to set up as a faculty. As yet there's such a high level of diversity across your faculties. You're all looking at kind of different areas, but there's so many common elements throughout in how you're setting up. There's some areas that still need development on this, such as all faculties have kind of said they're doing this PDSA cycle, but as yet it still needs to be developed further. Generally, because of this pause, you haven't been able to carry out this whole cycle, but more importantly is this informatic capabilities. So it really needs to kind of evidence the data that is being collected and what that is driving, and having some kind of dashboard to show others your progress is really important. Most of the faculties are focusing, you got given these themes of the placements, apprenticeships, etc. to look at, and many of you are looking at one theme at the moment and some are focusing on two at the same time. But what we've found is that the core team is crucial for the progress of the faculties. Next slide, please.
Hi everybody, so I'm Irene Carson, I'm from RETHINK Partners. So whereas Karen was responsible for crunching the big amounts of data that Health Education England were able to give us from your applications and from your progress reports, I then did, I started off with a bunch of discovery interviews. There was probably about sort of 10 to 12 of them, sort of quite early on, to figure out where should we go to start sort of peeling back the cover and having a bit of a deeper look at things. So we've ended up, obviously, there's a slide in a minute about COVID. COVID has had a profound effect on everyone, but what it kind of showed was the strength of the faculty approach itself and how that could actually give people a useful sort of infrastructure and platform to tackle a big issue like this. So we ended up sort of, we looked at the faculties because that's what we've been hired to do, but we couldn't not look at life in general for the AHP body. So you'll start to see a bit of a sort of blending now of kind of just big themes in general. So it was quite obvious that people liked the faculty approach, and they liked the way that Paula was providing that support and bringing people together. So it seemed like really early on, and before COVID hit, obviously, and then in the sort of touch points that we've had in between, people got an awful lot of just coming together, connecting with each other, and then sort of taking that outside the room, following up with each other to collaborate and learn together. Everybody that we spoke to certainly felt that the faculty approach was right. There's just some amazingly inspirational, I mean, the whole sector is really inspirational, but we started to understand just the sheer complexity of it. And I think we've all worked in and around the NHS and social care for a number of years and thought we understood what AHPs were, and actually delving into, you know, the 14 professions and all the complexity around that has been pretty mind-blowing. So we've seen some amazing examples of leadership, influencing, succession planning, collaboration, all of that stuff. Clinical placement strategy became the big ticket one during COVID as well. So we've tried to pull these things out in a bit more detail. And then it was really clear as well that, you know, in equal measure, having a sort of lifelong programme for leadership skills has been a sort of key determinant for progress and culture change and influencing all those partners in the ecosystem that Karen talked about. Placement tariff, again, came up as probably the number one, can we get this issue solved, please, and get some like really key sort of processy support around that. And then the data question just became more and more interesting as we went on. So I initially had all those discovery interviews, but for those of you who were there at our sort of last national session a few weeks ago, that was where we showed our findings so far, and then we went a bit deeper to go, here's what we're going to focus on now. Let's take a deeper look at how people approach the setup of their faculty and also the clinical placement strategy. And that's when we started to see the picture of data's almost sort of quite a new concept in a sense of what data sets are we all working from, what's the data that we're expecting to see, and how can we use that to make really, really important decisions that are really, really pertinent to our own ecosystems. And then we could also see that within those ecosystems, I think as Karen mentioned earlier, and I think the other speakers have sort of highlighted really well, you're all coming together with this shared vision, but within that, you absolutely have your own agendas within that. So, you know, funding streams and priorities for your local ICSs, you know, so are you all about sort of your own trust, but they're about primary care. So all these sort of conflicting things. And there was often sort of correlations between the focus of your faculty work and those, understandably, those range of really, really sort of pressing local issues. Next slide, please. So I think my next slide, if it's waiting for a few seconds to catch up, I think this might be the COVID one. No, it's not. It's about your state of readiness, new development areas. So I think I've kind of covered that already. It's really, really variable. And you know, but there's some key threads within that, in that people really, really want to and need to collaborate. I think there's some, you know, sort of by the end of the journey, we could start to see there's some massive disincentives in your systems. It's sort of just the way the whole thing is configured. Because if you're trying to go off and you know, develop local programs that are responsive to your own needs, they might not be aligned to other priorities in your system. So there's sort of, you know, how far can you go down the road and get the right support for it, with that being sort of congruent with what else is happening in your local systems. And I think just the diversity, there's a couple of points here. There's sort of, these are sort of the beginning of our questions back to the big picture. The diversity of the AHP body in itself sort of feels like it's really difficult for you to be representative when there's 14 different professions there. And, you know, as you know, just completely independent people looking in this, we started asking those questions about, you know, why is it those 14 professions have come together? Who decides who's in and who's out? Is it helpful in itself? You know, we ended up speaking to people a lot of the time about occupational therapy, physiotherapy, maybe dietetics, maybe a bit of podiatry, but, you know, things like, and it was great to hear it mentioned earlier, you know, drama therapists and those kind of things, you know, they are so niche. Prosthetists, for example, I haven't met one of you yet, and I'm dying to. Anyway, so the other things are the appetite for some kind of more intuitive placement infrastructure. because there was just such an administrative burden within that, and you might be having to replicate that for lots of different HEIs in your area. So it feels like that's just a generic administrative nightmare that gets in the way of people actually doing their day jobs and gets in the way of, you know, the clinical placement infrastructure sort of happening smoothly. So there is a bit of a recommendation later on about, is it worth looking at that? And I know it's like, that's a biggie. Strong need for the AHP education life cycle that has long-term investment parity with nursing and medical careers. So I was just constantly speaking to people who were quite isolated in their organisations, you know, trying to do everything, wearing several hats at the same time, and then perhaps looking across their office at nursing or medical colleagues who might have, you know, a 6-strong team of people doing that same job, and it just doesn't seem right. Or sensible for, you know, the big picture. So, which sort of leads nicely into how defining that relationship with your ICSEs at that very strategic level, so that they don't just think that nursing is the workforce burdening platform, and that you know, the AHP agenda isn't just a nice to do; it can really help solve their problems. Next slide, please. So yeah, so it's all of this. So I think I'll jog on to the next one, because I've talked about these sort of over the last 2 slides, really. Next slide, please. Thanks, Sharon. So there's, once you see the final report, we were joking the other day about how difficult it was to get our sort of almost 60 slides down to, I think we've got 10 for today, because we've only got a short slot with you. But we've started to build some sort of recipe cards that have come out from the sort of the deeper learning from our second round of interviews. So we did this, there was the initial discovery interviews, and then we've gone a bit deeper. So there's one around building an effective faculty, and I won't go through all the bullet points there, but you will get these slides later. And the second one is around a really successful clinical placement strategy as well. Next slide, please. I'll just leave that there for a second. Thank you. And then on to the next one, Sharon, thanks. So what was the impact of COVID? I feel like I don't really need to tell you this, but I will anyway. And it's been quite variable. So it was, you know, catastrophic in one way. And it was the cause of work pausing for some faculties, and obviously just the timing as well. That was 4 months ago that started, wasn't it? So, you know, for some people, they'd actually just sort of recruited people to post and sort of got their funding sorted out. So it was all sort of happening at a very crucial time. For a few, it was used as an opportunity to really push ahead plans and just adapt that emergency. So some of the faculties have been meeting virtually. I say 2 months, I should say 4 actually. Placement, you know, clinical placements obviously rose as the primary area of focus. But what we found was, even for the people that just hadn't been able to keep working with it, you know, it's certainly in those first couple of months, that just having that conversation started to make them think about what their next steps were and how they were going to use it as a focus point for everyone. And if you jog on to the next slide, please, Sharon. I'm going to hand you over to Jax at this point. Thanks, Jax.
Thanks, Irene. I'm Jax Mallender from Economics by Design, and we've been having a look at the return on investment of the faculties. Now, obviously, it's too early to tell because the impact hasn't been felt yet of having the faculties. But what we have done is to look at what the economic cost of the faculties are, and this isn't just the funding that you received, it's actually the full economic cost of the people who participate in the faculties and all the projects that will be initiated by the faculties to solve some of the local problems. And what we've found is that if the faculties do have an impact in line with expectations, they are likely to be actually provide very good value for money. So just to illustrate this, we looked at the how many vacancies would have to be filled for the costs of the faculties to be fully covered. And as you can see, that it's somewhere between 5 and 21, depending on how you value the vacancies, which if you look at the 21, in each faculty, if you are able to reduce your vacancy rate by 1 percentage point, so from 10% to 9% or from 5% to 4%, that is the equivalent of the 21 vacancies that need to be filled in order for the faculties to cover their costs. So I do feel that if the faculties are impactful in terms of aligning supply and demand, then they're likely to provide very good value for money. One of the important roles of the faculty, of course, is to actually build the evidence base. You know, we spent quite a significant amount of time trying to look for evidence in this space, and it is under-researched, so the faculties really have a good, important role to play there. In the same way as Irene has done for the process evaluation, we also looked at a recipe card for good practice. I'll leave this up for a minute. And essentially, it really is about ensuring that you understand and map clearly the logic of the initiation, the projects and solutions that you're pursuing. That you focus on measurement and data. This comes throughout the evaluation as an important point. You know, consider how you might start to think about measuring outcomes, particularly where they are long-term outcomes, not just in year. So this is really this good practice recipe card is focused very much on how you might build the evidence base to substantiate the claim of providing good value for money for the taxpayer. Next slide, please, Sharon. Thank you. So we have some recommendations across the whole evaluation. These aren't just from the economic evaluation. And I want to just go through these one by one. So the first thing I think we feel that this is quite important is that access to the placement tariff is really, really important. The money is there to support these projects, or at least there's some money there to support these projects. And it's really important for this to be available to the faculties. And we've gone so far as to suggest that HE should stipulate that a local trust should demonstrate how the tariff has actually been spent and that it's gone on these kinds of programmes. Irene spent some time talking about leadership. I think we've seen evidence of very strong leadership. We've heard already from some leaders on the presentations, and we'll hear more later today. But the leadership does need nurturing and support, and we think there's a case for putting some specific leadership programs in place. We think that there's a lot of heavy lifting going on in relation to clinical placement. So if HE were able to co-produce thinking with the AHP community on a new national infrastructure, this would, I think, take a lot of that heavy lifting away. So again, that's one of our recommendations. We want to emphasize the importance of AHPs being seen alongside issues around nursing and medical careers. If AHPs are going to really fulfill their potential, it's really important that they have professional development parity. It's slightly outside the terms of our evaluation, but I think the faculties have a very important role to play here. We have recommendations, particularly around the relationship with the ICSs. Very important that the ICSs perceive this as just as important as the burning platform in nursing. And we think the faculties have a really important profile raising, awareness raising role to play, but so too does HEE and what support it can give those AHP faculties to do that. I've mentioned building the evidence base, and we've emphasised the need to push forward with data as well. And I think there is a case for some central coordination or core metrics in terms of data requirements, data collection and data management, just to, again, take some of that heavy lifting away in terms of providing a core set of information for each faculty. And then finally, PDSA is a really important tool, but it does also need a bit of training in it. It needs to be central to the process, and it needs to be built around the informatics as well. So I think new faculties, this is a core part of the mechanism through which you will be impactful. So it's really important that you embed these processes very much into your normal working practices. And we have one last slide. So Sharon, if we could just have next steps. We've written, as Irene said, a much longer report, which will be formally submitted at the end of July. We do hope you'll be able to see it and comment on it and take some learning from it, we hope. In it, we have produced some logic models of how faculties might be expected to be set up and how they might be expected to work. We've obviously made some recommendations. We've developed these pen portraits that have been referenced through this text, which really are like sort of showcase good practice, and of course the recipe cards. We are also hoping to collaborate with HE on an academic paper, which we hope will be produced during August. And we're very much looking forward to participating in the virtual showcase on the 9th of September. So that's us done. Thank you all very, very much on the call who have helped us to do this evaluation during such challenging times. We really, really appreciate the support that you've given us. Yes, thank you all very much. We couldn't have done it without you.
Wow, thank you very much. So much information there, such a lot of food for thought for everybody. The chat box is going crazy. People are really desperate to get their hands on the report, on the recipe cards, and there's an awful lot of agreement about what you have said in terms of our parity with our nursing colleagues. People, I think, have found it really refreshing to the fact that you've all got fresh eyes on this, that you've been able to recognise some of the challenges that we have been living with for a very long time. So people, I think, have been really inspired and really found it very, very valuable. On a personal note, I'd just like to say thank you to the three of you. You've done a sterling job. It's not been easy because of COVID, but the fact that you have managed to get all that information, all that learning, and all those recommendations in such a short time, in such a difficult landscape, is fantastic. And I think I'm so glad that we chose you, and we will make sure that your findings are spread far and wide. So thank you so much. I can't believe we're actually a little bit early. So I'm now going to set you free to go and have a short break. The refreshment break was due at 11:15, so if we can have you back here for just before 11:25. If you stay plugged in so that you don't lose connection, but please go and stretch your legs, and I will look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody. I hope most of you have come back. It looks like we've still got over 146 people on the call, which is fantastic. So thank you for staying with us. I'm sure you'll agree with me that it's been fantastic so far. There's such enthusiasm and motivation and inspiration out there. So I hope you're sucking that up. I certainly am. And Twitter, I'm noticing, is really active at the moment. So please tweet your thoughts and your opinions, hashtag AHP Faculty. Okay, so I'm now going to hand you over briefly to a surprise guest. We've got Rachel Brandreth from our Cornwall AHP Faculty, who would like to just tell you a little bit about AHP's Day this year.
Hi everyone, thanks Paula for letting me kind of jump in on the agenda today. I just thought I would like to take this opportunity to kind of make the link for people between the AHP faculty work and AHP's Day, which is only in 3 months' time on the 14th of October. The golden threads this year are inspire, appreciate, celebrate and connect. And so you can see there's a really strong link there between all the sort of aspirations of the AHP faculties and our AHP workforce agenda. Last night there was a straw poll on the WeHPs on Twitter, and they found that, okay, it was only a quick snapshot, but 46% of people said that they've not started any planning yet. 33% said they were thinking about it, with only 21% with planning underway. So with the 3 months to go, I think it's a really great opportunity for people to think about what's going on in their area. And it's a good time to kind of influence that and make sure that, and it's an opportunity to bring the two agendas together. I've popped in the chat box the link to the resources, and we're really encouraging people to share what you're doing with your planning using the hashtag AHP's Day. And then again this year we'll have the Z-maps on the website and encouraging people to share the resources. And as Suzanne says, we're certainly stronger together. Thanks, Paula.
You're very welcome, Rachel, and thank you for sharing that. It's all related, isn't it? And we can use AHP Day to celebrate and showcase more of what we're doing. Okay, so I'm now going to, we've now got 3 more presentations from 3 of our fantastic AHP faculty test beds. So I'm going to now hand you over to Claire Pheasant.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay? My name's Claire Pheasant. I'm Associate Director of Allied Health Professionals at University Hospital Coventry and Warwickshire, and I'm Chair of the AHP Faculty for Coventry and Warwickshire Healthcare Partnership. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our journey. We also focused on placement capacity, but I'm going to try and focus more on setting up the faculty and where it sits within the system and how we've used it to our benefit during COVID. Next slide, please. So the timing of the bid from HE was perfect for us. We just finished a number of listening events across the healthcare partnership, supported by AHP leads across the system, and we started drafting our work plan and strategy for the coming 2 to 3 years. A huge focus for that was around workforce development, and it included both undergraduate and postgraduate AHP training and support. So we set out our objective of the AHP faculty, and we saw this as supporting the council in delivery in some of their key objectives, so almost the engine room behind the work that was required to occur. We recognised really early on that this is much bigger than obviously placement capacity, but we needed to identify an area to focus our attention whilst setting up the faculty. And the intention was to also include work streams around work experience, preceptorship, return to practice, advanced practice and careers development, and many other areas also. Next slide, please. So our key objectives were to set up the faculty and work towards a sustainable model. And this was our key priority, recognising that we'd identified placement capacity and delivery on increasing placement capacity as an objective for the project. We strongly felt that by setting up the faculty and making sure it was sustainable for the future, it would give us a really strong set of foundations to move forwards over the coming years. We, from the outset, included our local higher education institute, which for us is Coventry University. They sit on our AHP council, and so we jointly put together our bid for the monies, and they were involved at the outset at setting up and helping us develop the governance structures for the council. We wanted to make sure that we had a governance framework and reporting arrangements, and the faculty reports directly into the AHP Council on a monthly basis, but the terms of reference also included the ability for us to report into our partnership meetings with our higher education institutes. Again, initially this was with Coventry, but as you'll see, this has expanded rapidly over the last few months, so that we had clear lines of reporting into various sectors. We were going to establish baseline placement capacity, and we wanted to make sure we had clear policy and escalation processes for the management of placements, which was hidden in our STP at the moment. And we wanted to make sure that we had a strategic plan for carrying on the work that the faculty was going to start. As we'd already said, the plan was to increase placement capacity, looking at new models of practice and sound governance within organisations of the healthcare partnership. Next slide, please. So this is where our AHP faculty sits. We have members from provider organisations, research, education, and other members of the AHP community. We sit at the HEI partnership meetings on a monthly basis, and we report into AHP Council on a monthly basis. But alongside that, we have AHP leadership sat in our people board, our healthcare partnership programmes, where they look at key work streams such as frailty, rehab, MSK, and then we also have a seat at Clinical Forum. At the early stages, we made sure that all these groups were aware that the faculty was starting, and we were able to link some of the work into the faculty. Next slide, please. So our journey, we appointed and mobilised a project team as quickly as possible. We had a job description written in anticipation of being successful with the bid, and so we're able to go out to put into the post very quickly. We went for a secondment post and had already started to plant seeds with our organisations around opportunity to move people into this. We also used admin support, which as AHP leads, a lot of us didn't have, but it allowed, by putting in some admin support early on, it freed our time up as well to support the AHP faculty, rather than waiting to put a formal project lead and person in post, which has allowed us to be more mobile quickly over the last months as well. It was interesting to see on the feedback there around the dial-ins and the support from Paula and the team. We found those invaluable. The project meetings where we could all dial in and share what was going on across all of our faculties was really, really important. And there has been much sharing of good practice across all the faculty test beds. We held our first AHP faculty meeting early in February, so quite quickly after appointing and setting up the project, and we agreed clear milestones. We were supported by the head of school at at Coventry University, and we had membership from all the AHP leads across the system. We also, in that early period, presented to our LWAB, which is now People Board. We presented our submission and have since reported monthly on progress, which has meant that our Chief Nursing Officers, Chief Workforce Information Officers and Chief Medical Officers have been cited to this piece of work throughout, which has been really important. Next slide, please. So as the theme throughout is COVID did put a spanner in the works for some of the placement capacity work, because obviously our placements had ceased, and the outlook for the coming year has changed again. But by having the faculty in place at such an early stage, it provides an invaluable resource and mechanism for us to manage some of the challenges that COVID-19 threw at us in regard to not just AHP placements, but also a number of other workforce issues that the faculty could support with. So the initial plans for our faculty were that it would be quite small scale initially. We'd be looking at OT, physio, ODP and dietetic placement capacity, and we'd be working primarily with Coventry University. However, early on during COVID, we expanded rapidly to include all the professional groups that we required across our system, and also expanded out to include Birmingham City University and the University of Birmingham. We set up weekly faculty meetings with a focus on placement capacity and also shared learning and support, with regards to things like bringing back staff and volunteers, so that we could share our resource across the system quickly to meet the demands as they changed throughout the period. We agreed system job descriptions and contracts to support practice placements. We shared information about the portal, which, although initially was a big change, it has provided us the oversight of placements within an organisation that we were lacking at the outset. We've had regular updates to the people board, as I've already fed back. One of the bonuses of that, and should I say bonuses, that there has been much more visibility of the complexity of the provision of AHP placements within our senior leadership teams. The fact that we take students from a number of different professions who all have very different programs of training and placement allocation, and that we use a much broader range of higher education institutes than our nursing and medical colleagues, does add an extra complexity to placement allocation and support that hasn't previously been acknowledged, but that has been made much more transparent. What we have managed to do during this time related to the placement demand and capacity is that we have worked with those three HEIs to map our AHP placement demand for the coming academic year, recognising that some of the placements that should have occurred in first and second years have now been pushed on to other parts of the course programme. So we now have a clear understanding of where those placements are and have identified hotspots of where demand will outstrip capacity if we can't change our models of practice. We've also looked at placement allocation models, again, primarily at Coventry University, but now working with Birmingham. Placement allocation happens in a completely different way for most of the professional groups, even within the same university. And our processes as providers is different, again, within professional groups. And so we're working towards a more streamlined, centralised process for allocating both our placement numbers at both sides of that process. And then we've recognised and have started to develop AHP faculties at an organisational level, so looking at a hub and spoke model. So what we have built now is a really good oversight model across the system of what's required and how we deliver it, but we now need to get the support in at an organisational level. And we've been working with our practice development colleagues within nursing to look at how we might be able to replicate and work with them to develop those opportunities for our AHP's professions. Next slide, please. So the impact and what's changed with our AHP faculty. What isn't on here, I suppose, is that in January, the AHP faculty did not exist, and our organisation of workforce challenges related to training and education were dealt with very much in a siloed way, not just sometimes in professional groups within organisations, but across the system also. The plan was, and we had set up in February, to have our AHP faculty with the three acute trusts, a primary care trust, one of our HEI colleagues. We were focusing on 3 professional groups. We did have CCG support and support from HEE. What I have omitted from this slide, and I apologise if you're on the call, Denise, is that we do have local authority input to our faculty as well, who are really important. In July, we now currently have all the acute trusts again with the primary care trust, but we now have 3 HEIs. We're looking at 8 professional groups with support from CCG and HEE, but we now also have input from practice development teams from our nursing colleagues as well. We absolutely recognise, and it's already been mentioned, that we recognise we don't have involvement here from private, voluntary and independent sector, and that's something that we're clearly aware of and are working towards bringing into this process, as they can help with a number of the challenges that we've got. Next slide, please. So the successes, we've had brilliant engagement from all involved with a shared purpose, and the weekly touch points that we've had with the professional leads at the universities and across the healthcare partnership have been invaluable, not just as a support mechanism, but we've absolutely been able to problem solve in real time and have been successful in supporting a number of placements across Coventry and Warwickshire over the last 2 to 3 months, which has meant a number of third-year students who would have been challenged in completing their courses are now going to do so on time. We have appointed AHPs in 2 organisations to training and education lead posts. One of those has been done as the tariff monies has been identified and now put into a separate budget to be utilised to support AHP training and development. And the other organisation is doing it on a pilot project, but we'll absolutely be using the outcomes of this project to make the case to our people board that tariff monies are utilised in a way that is of benefit to the AHP workforce. Planning's well underway for the coming academic year. As already said, we've identified our placement demand for the next 12 months and are working with our professional leads to ensure that we can offer as much capacity as possible to support and ensure that hotspots in delivery are limited. And we recognise that's not just our problem to solve. It needs to be done in a much broader sense, and in the last couple of weeks we've started to link in as regional faculty leads to set up a meeting so that we can start to look at some of the commonalities across our faculties to enable a broader support to be put out there. Next slide, please. None of this could be done without the team, and I think, as Helen said, our engagement has been fantastic from all parties, but Jo would have been presenting with me, but because we're on a virtual platform it's challenging to do that. But Jo works at Coventry University and she's been the number cruncher behind a lot of what we're doing and pulling a lot of the data together. So I just wanted to give a special thanks to Jo, because without her we wouldn't have got as far as we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Excellent. Lots of practical tips, hints, advice and guidance for us moving forwards. So I think there's an awful lot for people to take away today. So I hope you're taking lots of notes, and you get access to the recording and the presentations. So I'm now going to hand you over to Vicky Lightfoot to share her experiences around work experience.
Thank you, Paula. Yes, like Paula's just said, I'm Vicky Lightfoot and I was the project lead here in Lincolnshire for our AHP faculty. I'm just going to really focus on just one aspect of our faculty today, which is work experience, but we did actually have 5 objectives in total across the faculty. So can we go to our next slide, please? We were quite lucky here in Lincolnshire in terms of work experience. We already had an established platform for work experience where individuals could log in and access what was available in terms of work experiences across the system. That was both NHS providers and social care. However, what we realised was very quickly that platform, although it was great, wasn't doing what it needed to and generating the placements and the opportunities that we could offer to those looking for careers in AHPs. So what we did was we set out to make sure that we, as a faculty, we could improve that. Can I have the next slide, please? So the faculty aim was to increase available work experience and opportunities on the Talent Academy website and update information on AHP careers. Like I said, we had established already the website, but the opportunities that were advertised on there were varied, and each provider organisation had their own approach to submitting their opportunities. So the faculty was a real launch pad, like I said, for us to be able to bring that and bring consistency to our offering across the system, so that we were giving consistent messages out. When we looked at the platform, it had different opportunities. We were using different terminology depending on which provider organisation we were from. So to someone who's maybe new to AHPs as a concept, it was quite difficult to negotiate and navigate around what opportunities there were. So we were able to pull from the website initial data on how we had been offering work experiences over the last few years. And as you can see, in 2018, when the website was first made live, we had 46 opportunities that were fulfilled, 72 in 2019. And we had started 2020 fairly positively, with 11 work experience opportunities happening before all all work experience opportunities stopped in March because of COVID. However, what the data did indicate was that those opportunities were in physio, OT and speech and language therapy. We also had one from audiology. So although it wasn't an AHP, because of on the platform, we use the term allied health rather than AHP. That's where they sat on the actual work experience database. However, we did have opportunities for radiology and dietetics already on the system, but we knew that that was only 6 of our 14 professions. That was something that we definitely wanted to look at as part of this and as part of the faculty work. Can I go to the next slide, please? So what did we do as a faculty? The faculty has enabled us to have a systems approach to work experience. It was an opportunity to bring partners together and to relook at the platform and really look at how we could relaunch it and make sure that we had consistency across from everybody, so that it was easier for the user to negotiate their way round and what we were doing. So what we were able to do was we brought everybody together, and that included our Talent Academy, and it was most probably the first time that those who coordinate work experience opportunities in their organisations actually had an opportunity to talk to the Talent Academy face to face, to really understand what the platform was about, why we did things, or why the Talent Academy asked us to submit things in certain ways. And I think that better understanding of what the system did, how it was used, helped the coordinators to look at why we had some of the challenges we had, and perhaps why we didn't have more work experience students and opportunities coming through the platform. So through the faculty, what we did was we met 3 times before the faculty was paused. So we actually had 3 face-to-face meetings to really start challenging ourselves internally around why we were offering what we were offering. Some of our focus was around the age groups that we were targeting. Some organisations didn't have anybody under 16, some were under 18, some were over 14, but what we found was that varied within the organisations and the professional groups as well, which we said, you know, there was that internal and peer challenge about, well, why do you do that? And some of it was we didn't know that restriction was on our placement offer on the website. Some of it was policy and procedure within their own organisation. So there was some real debate, and we were just starting to make those agreements when we paused in terms of how that looked going forward. What we also found on the website and through the initial data scan was that we offered between 1-day and 5-day work experience opportunities only. So if people were looking for anything longer than that, or maybe 2 weeks as part of their schoolwork, because it said 1 to 5 days, they thought we couldn't offer them more. And when we went back to the Talent Academy, what we found is over 50% of the work experience opportunities were what they classed as bespoke work experience, where the Talent Academy had come to the providers and asked if we could give this opportunity, even though it wasn't on the website. So we knew that we weren't fulfilling what our work experience opportunity students wanted, and we could see that as an opportunity to change things. Like I said, on the website, we were classed as allied health and not AHP. So to navigate that was difficult. And also what we were finding within the professions, we were advertising as our specialities rather than as a profession. So we were giving opportunities in, say, things like MSK physio. But if people didn't know what MSK physio was, they were less likely to click on and look at the opportunity. So we had that discussion about maybe taster sessions for each profession, and keeping it quite broad, and then having that one-to-one discussion with the work experience afterwards, once they'd applied, to really get out what they wanted from the work experience and make it more to the individual's needs. We also had the discussion around what other work experience opportunities we could offer. We were very much looking at school leavers, the sort of 16, 14 to 21-year-olds, but we did also start to explore the idea of maybe using the platform for work experience opportunities for our own professionals, so cross-organisational work experience for professions. So maybe that they hadn't had an opportunity to go and work in an area, and it might be something that they might want to develop as a career opportunity, but give them that safe space to be able to do that through the system and through the faculty. So we were just starting to explore these when we paused. So lots really to come out of the faculty and around the work experience, and bringing us together so we consistently gave the same offering. And like I said, it was mainly in our main professions, but throughout all of this, our ambition was to try and get a work experience offer for the majority of our AHPs and AHP professions. So, 6 at the moment. The ambition would be that ideally we would have one for each of the AHP professions going forward. Okay, next slide, please. What I'd like to do now is just have a little bit of a reflection on our faculty structure and our scope and our overall faculty, although we've focused on work experience today. We very much saw the faculty as a stepping stone and a platform and an opportunity for others to get involved in strategic aims and deliver projects, and that stepping stone into the AHP Council, that we found that a lot of our professionals in practice saw the disconnect between what the council done and what they saw as the leaders, and actually what was actually happening in practice. And we saw the AHP faculty as a real opportunity for those individuals to influence change and be part of that change experience, so to give them some leadership and project opportunities. And that might be just in one aspect of a faculty project, or actually as an overall member of the AHP faculty. And I think this is quite, we sort of use the analogy within Lincolnshire that our individual organisations were our seeds, and the AHP faculty grew them into our AHP Council, and then obviously we influenced and report into LWAB and to our STP partners as well. So I think we saw that faculty as absolutely a structure within reporting into our council, but its own standalone structure to really give people the opportunity to influence their professions going forward as well. And I think that was really good to put that in, but it also gave us, as an AHP faculty, I think for me as the project lead, having all the other faculties to bounce ideas off, now having the platform to share the work that we're doing has really helped, and sometimes broaden the horizons. We may have looked very internally about what fitted for Lincolnshire, but actually seeing what everybody else has done has made me think and pause quite often in this process about, well, could we do that, or could we do it differently? What could we take from others as well? And I think that peer support has really helped develop our faculty and the work we've done, and as me as project lead to be able to do that as well. Can I have the next slide, please? So, like I've alluded to, unfortunately, we had to pause the faculty in Lincolnshire. We're just about to relaunch again now. But I think in some respects, COVID has really changed where we were in March to where we are now, has radically changed. And I think it's a really good opportunity for us to embrace some of that learning that we've had over the last 3 months. And a part of the reset is most probably something we would never have considered back in January and February. And as part of the restart, we're going to actually look at virtual work experience opportunities and how that can fit onto the Talent Academy website, and how we can perhaps in that career advice and development bit is give people bite-sized opportunities to understand the professions before they then commit to a work experience opportunity. So I think COVID in some respects has really helped us to pause and think, actually, let's really think out of the box and do things differently. So that's one of our things. And also we are going to hopefully in the next couple of months now really confirm the process for the work experience applications and develop that. And I just hope to see those numbers that we showed at the beginning of the slide will just now rocket as we go forward, and implement the stuff that we've done here in the faculty. So thank you.
No, thank you, Vicky. That's fantastic. Wow, there's so much inspiration, isn't there? And I think there's the general consensus that not only is it helpful to have your own networks within your own faculty, but it's also really valuable to have that wider family, AHP family of faculties across the country. So it's really important that we all stick together on that and maintain contact. Now, last but not by no means least, I'm going to hand you over to Jane Melton, who is going to talk to us from Gloucestershire.
Thank you very much, Paula. Just making sure my microphone was switched on. Yes, hello, my name is Jane Melton and I'm delighted to be speaking on behalf of the AHP faculty members of Gloucestershire Integrated Care System. There is a header in each of my slides which asks a question, and hopefully you'll gain some answers in what I'm able to share on behalf of our team. I've also noticed as I've listened to others some commonalities with the other faculties, so hopefully that will reinforce the importance of this as a mechanism going forward. To have the next slide, please. I'd like to give a little bit of context to start off. This slide is a map of Gloucestershire with some key demographics within it. I think there might be some feedback in the slides. Gloucestershire is in the very north of the southwest region, bordering Wales to the west, Oxfordshire to the right, and Midlands to the north, with Bristol and Wiltshire to the south. Gloucestershire has approximately 632,000 people in its population. It's a very neat structure with collaborative partners and visionary leaders. And the anticipated population growth actually by 2030 is up to 700,000 people. Currently it's a large rural population, but does have some dense urban areas and multicultural areas too. So we serve a very diverse community. There are emerging higher education institutes for health and care in our locality in the University of Gloucestershire, and we also have strong partnerships for AHP education with other higher education institutes also. And people tend to stay in Gloucestershire because it's really quite lovely. Now, our AHP faculty set out to support developments of transformation in our ICS footprint to meet population needs, and we think that's really important to set that out. The next slide, please. We already had an AHP Council which was set up in March 2019, so fairly recently really, and we set out to enhance the function of our AHP Council through the faculty structure. Our AHP Council reports to the Integrated Care System Clinical Council and latterly our Local Workforce Action Board. And the purpose of the AHP Council is to offer one Gloucestershire ICS AHP strategic leadership. Essentially, we see ourselves as the go-to hub for specialist AHP expertise. As a council, we meet 6 weekly, so not very frequently. We have about 35 members from 8 different organisations locally, and this lovely photograph of our great AHP leadership colleagues I'm delighted to share with you. Our AHP faculty is a mechanism to further raise the profile of AHP workforce developments to maximise their contribution to transformed health and care. So our initial faculty project is to increase capacity for student placement provision. In December 2019, we were delighted to apply to become a faculty with support from Health Education England, and pictured in this slide with me is Mary Hutton, our CCG and Integrated Care System Accountable Officer, and Marion Andrews-Evans, the Director of Nursing of both the CCG and the ICS. And this is important because we know that our leaders are ambitious to consider new ways of working for best care outcomes and motivated to work across traditional boundaries and professional delivery groups. So our faculty methodology is about quality improvement, specifically the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles where appropriate. And whilst our first project in the short term has focused on increasing clinical placements, particularly in physiotherapy and paramedic science, we're also keeping other developments in sight, in short-term sight, including inspiring AHP careers, advancing clinical practice roles, apprenticeships and return to practice. None of these we see as mutually exclusive in terms of the workforce feed. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the governance structure of a faculty which has met weekly since January 2020. So that's about 6 months now, isn't it? And you'll have seen other examples in previous presentations of similar structures, where our AHP faculty, which is circled in red here, feeds into the AHP Council, but also has a link into other strategic groups that aren't necessarily AHP. This is really important because it demonstrates our responsibility in the system as allied health professionals and our influence into the integrated system. Hopefully you can see that that's an important thing to lay out and to share with others too. Next slide, please. In Gloucestershire, we do see our AHP faculty as the engine room, and in fact I think we put that in our initial expression of interest to Health Education England, and we see the council as driving action with ICS partners organisation. So collaborative leadership is the only way we can progress, and so I'm introducing you to our chief engineers here, allied health professions engineers, our fabulous faculty colleagues, and I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank and appreciate them all. You'll see in the small print here that people are from different organisations. They're a collective of motivated, collaborative and visionary experts drawn from senior responsible AHP leaders. We do have some AHP chiefs and also others from which have different expertise to help us with our solutions for workforce development. Next slide, please. Of course, we've had to respond to COVID like everybody else, but we have maintained our weekly meetings of the faculty through it. That said, we've adjusted our conversations quite significantly, and we've used the faculty conversations to share information, to support swift developments and to respond with the system. So, for example, we've engaged in the Bring Back Staff initiative. We've had clinical cell updates from colleagues who've attended those on behalf of the AHP community, and we've maintained connections across the system. We've also invited guests as we've moved forward to join our faculty, and the session you see pictured in this slide is a recent extended faculty meeting with invitations to additional council members to meet with Carrie Biddle, our fabulous Southwest HEE AHP lead, to review new opportunities. Next slide, please. So the benefits we've seen, as I repeat what others have said, have been the engagement, really building the culture of working across the system as an AHP group. You can see here that we've identified the governance and reporting structures. We've shared a purpose, again, repeating what others have said. We've demonstrated flexibility and responsiveness, but stayed to our mission. And we've been very action orientated, nurturing the leadership to be collaborative, and then expanding our AHP courses. We've been very fortunate to bid through other means and have increased diagnostic radiography and operating department practitioners within our local HEI. So that's helping us move forward. The next slide, please, is about the challenges that we've faced, and one of the things has been the I can feel Suzanne Rastrick's words in my ears here about cleaning out the understairs cupboard, about ESR data, electronic staff record data, and how the whole faculty experience has reinforced the importance of that. And we've seen that with a letter that the HP Council commissioned us as a faculty to write on behalf of the Council to all AHPs in the county to thank them for their effort through COVID. And that letter wasn't difficult to write. The challenge was being able to make sure and be assured that it was delivered to every AHP in the county. And I'm really thankful for my colleagues in the various organisations for ensuring that has happened. Other challenges, we are very ambitious, as I've mentioned, in Gloucestershire, but I suppose we would say, please don't feel you have to do everything at once. And we keep our meetings going. That's been a challenge through COVID, of course, but it's been really important. So thinking about our next steps, this slide you see has onwards written across the top of it. I think it's a bit of a strapline for us in Gloucestershire. We are resetting our efforts. We've developed a job description and are about to advertise a system role for a student placement development and support person from an HP perspective. We've been active as an AHP leadership group and individual profession solution. So we're really looking at both the individuals and the AHP leadership itself, reinforcing that culture of collaboration. We're planning engagement events for a wider group of AHPs, in particular with our higher education colleagues, winning the hearts and minds for new placement developments, which is a challenge, but also designing new ways of delivering student placements using digital and simulation technology. We can absolutely see more opportunities for that now, and also embracing digital methods of connecting. So we're bidding for new sources of support to increase and sustain our AHP capacity, placement capacity going forward. And my last slide, next slide, is a great big thank you and acknowledgement to various groups. So, for example, we do want to say a big thank you to Health Education England for their vision to invest in AHP developments. I want to say thank you to Paula Breeze and also to Carrie Biddle locally to us. We want to thank our ICS partners for seeing the potential of AHPs to be part of the system transformation and for support for our bid. Special thanks to Mary Hutton and Marion Andrews-Evans, Steve Hams and John Trevains, who are key executives in our system, and to all our AHP colleagues in Gloucestershire, in all our organisations. And finally, a big thank you for inviting this presentation and for listening to us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. It's an absolute pleasure, as always. I feel like we need to do a big round of applause. How on earth do we do a big round of applause on this forum? Maybe you could just clap.
We all come off mute, Paula, and everybody claps.
Okay, off mute, everyone. Give us a big clap.
Now there's a first, Paula Breeze. Well done, everybody.
That was absolutely phenomenal. What amazing presenters, fantastic insights. You've done so well, and thank you so much. Okay, right, it's over to you. Okay, sorry everybody, can I ask, are people still clapping? Leanne's still clapping there. Contain yourselves. If you can turn your cameras off, please, and you put yourselves on mute.
Okay, I just need you to have that conversation. We might just give them back then to wait for you, Ian.
Sorry, somebody's. I can hear somebody else's conversation. If you wouldn't mind putting yourselves on mute. Okay. Whew. Right. So we've been asking people to put their questions in the chat box, and we have a few of them. So I'm just going to go through. If you have any further questions, I mean, I think most of the things in the chat box, to be honest, are words of encouragement, people agreeing with other people and being inspired. So there's an awful lot of love in that chat box, and I would urge you to take the time to have a read through if you can. So let's have a look at specific questions. So I think we've got a question about how do you link with the wider STP ICS and draw in expertise from there to support? How have you shared it back from AHPs, and how has it impacted on the workforce strategy, etc.? So I think this was a question for Helen right at the very beginning at 10:30. So Helen, could I put you on the spot? Would you mind?
Yeah.
Would you mind just reiterating what you've popped in the chat box there, just for the benefit of everybody?
So I didn't cover the governance structure of our faculty in my presentation, which others had, but essentially ours is basically the same, pretty much the same as what other people had said, that our faculty links to our AHP council, which is linked to our ICS clinical cabinet, but our whole ICS meeting structure is actually currently under review as they move formally into the ICS structure. So we don't really know what that's going to look like going forward. Obviously, we are as an AHP council, kind of making noise to ensure that we are included in any meeting structures that are established. I personally think the faculty really needs to link to the people board, and again I'm in conversation with the people developing that about having a seat at that table, so I'm hopeful that we will be able to forge that relationship. I will be honest, in North West London we have had challenges as AHPs linking into our formal ICS structure. It hasn't been an easy journey, and we've definitely got more work to do, but that's kind of where we're at the moment in the sort of general direction of travel. Don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, no, thank you, Helen. There's a question around data. Now, this is an issue that's cropped up time and time again, and it's certainly been identified as something that needs addressing in order to have a successful faculty. So the question was, any hints or tips for retrieving data from multiple organisations across a faculty to support the PDSA cycle? Would anybody like to have a go at answering the question around retrieving data?
Paula, I don't mind starting. It's Susanna.
Thank you, Susanna. That would be very kind.
We have really struggled with this, so I don't have the magic answer to it. I think the key is really knowing your leads and not just taking from one source. So we have taken from ESR, we have gone out to the teams as well and asked for the data. We've checked it, it's various leads. So it's been a bit of a cross, multiple ways of trying to do it and cross-reference things before we actually take it for granted.
Okay. Could I perhaps ask one of my AHP leads in Health Education England to come in here? Because I know that in another part of my my work, I've certainly asked for support around data collection from HEE. So I would wonder if any of you would like to chip in about what you're able to provide.
Paula, it's Naomi here. Can you hear?
Yes. Hello, Naomi.
Hi there. That would be the other part of your work, wouldn't it? The conversations that we've had.
Yes.
So I think there's something really key here about that workforce planning, data and intelligence is and should be one of the key support offers from HE regional teams through their WPI, workforce planning and intelligence teams. So I'd really encourage faculties and AHP councils to make connections with those teams through your regional HE, AHP leads. I know it's not easy to access that data sometimes, but it is there. There is absolutely no shortage of data dashboards and data within HE. So we just need to find a way to make it easier, I think, to get it to councils. And I know Carrie and I have had conversations about this, and Laura too. So I'm not sure. I know Carrie's on the call.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Naomi. Could I ask if we've got regional leads on the call, would you mind putting in the chat box your which region you're in and a contact email address, so that if people did want to talk to you about data, they can get in touch with you easily, please?
Hi, Paula, it's Ganesh. We've done a piece of work across the Midlands and East, actually, so there is that data available for our chiefs across the region. So yeah, that's there, out there. Thanks.
Yeah, brilliant. Jane, did you have your hand up? Have you put it down again?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to come in on the data piece, just to mention that sometimes we can receive data and know in our bones that it isn't accurate. So from us, there was a lesson in that we wanted to really look at the data around student placements to see if it felt right. And for us, it didn't. So we've had to go around the loop and put it right. And that then gives us an accurate baseline on which to grow. So yeah, just a note of caution that we should interrogate the data.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jane.
Paula, you're on mute.
Dear, you think I'd know better, wouldn't you? There's a question for our evaluation colleagues around: has the impact of utilising AHP skills to develop services using current nursing vacancies been taken into account with the evaluation? I suspect the answer is no, but I wonder if Jax, are you around still? Are you able to?
I am. Not explicitly. We didn't really look at impact because obviously, we were just focused on the, sorry, my dog's barking in the background. We were just focusing on the establishment of the faculties in alignment with what the theory of change would be. So no, we didn't. But I think that would be a really important thing to look at, particularly in the context of COVID, as you go forward, and in terms of the checklist that we recommended, this would be a really good thing to be picking up as an explicit measure of impact. Such an important point.
Yeah, thank you. What platform can we use to learn and share developments? There is a virtual platform available, so if people would like to join, if you could drop me a line, drop me an email, and I will put my email address in here, then I can allow for you to have access, and then you can collaborate with all the faculties across the country. So that's a relatively new development, but I think going forwards it's going to be really valuable, and people are already using that platform to share and talk to each other.
Paula, did you see Suzanne's comment about updating on the people plan?
No. Would you? Right. Paula, shall I update the people plan? Suzanne, are you there? Would you like to just?
I'm not sure that was a rhetorical question on your part, but just to give colleagues a heads up, really, in terms of Beverly and I have been working over the weekend on the final draft of the people plan. So just to say, the Secretary of State has asked Prana Issar, the Chief People Officer in NHS England Improvement, to bring forward and publish the people plan before Parliament rises for the summer recess. So it's very imminent. Compared to the very detailed document that a number of you will have seen and engaged in terms of as stakeholders with us, during the last 12 months, it's now feels quite a different thing. So the intention is that it will be almost published in two halves. So what we will see very shortly is more of what I describe as a global offer around the great place to work, but also picking up some of the supply issues we've been talking about this morning. So I really just wanted to make the point, Paula, thank you for giving me the slot, is that it's coming. What you've been talking about this morning and really celebrating the successes and the leadership that you've demonstrated here will be underpinned by this document. And it really sets out the vital components in terms of workforce supply, but also getting the conditions right for our students and indeed for our practitioners when they're in the service. So I think it will be really helpful to us. It's coming very shortly. And the other thing, if I may, Paula, is the second thing for me, which is really important for all of us, is, as you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, I pressed the pause button on the development of our new AHP strategy for England to replace AHP's Into Action, which should have been published early in 2021. So very shortly, the beginning of the turn of the year, we will unpress the pause button and begin that process. So the work you're doing, and indeed the sense of where we get to with this, will also be in the crowdsourcing that we will do subsequently, will be a really important thing for us to factor in. So I just really wanted to bring both of those to colleagues' attention, Paula. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I'm glad I didn't have to answer that one on my own. That's great, thanks. Right.
Paula, sorry, can I just jump in? I'm also mindful of the fact that somebody has also asked a question about the placement tariff monies and whether HE have any influence over stipulating where that goes within organisations. I don't know, is Beverly still on the line? I don't know whether this is something Beverly might specifically be able to talk to.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much indeed. That is a brilliant question. So in every conversation we have, and we have had this conversation for years, the challenge is that in good faith, HE puts into the system every year a significant amount of money to support clinical placements across the board. And clearly that finance is there to support a myriad of supporting things within your organisations. But even when I was back in service, the challenge of trying to locate that money was considerable. So several things are happening at the moment. The fantastic work done by our evaluation partners here to shine a light on the challenges is our first sort of standpoint. The second place is that Paula's working with several of the leads across England who have worked to find this resource and deploy this resource in novel ways to help then others learn from that. And what HEE is doing is we're doing two pieces of work at the moment, is that we're doing a full piece of work reviewing placement tariff in general, being very, very clear what it is that we expect to see for that placement tariff. And then as part of our quality monitoring, to be really clear with organisations what we need to see and what we need to pay attention to with that resource. And many of you will have been involved in the place-based tariff pilots. And you will notice in that environment, the desire of the future will be to look at potentially working at a system level to liberate training opportunities. So that we're then able to think very, very differently about how that resource is understood and deployed, but around some very clear outcomes where a workforce system has to pay as much attention to its orthoptic workforce as it does to its paramedic workforce, as it does to its nursing workforce, as it does to its medical workforce, as it does to all of its workforce, if it is going to offer a service that is going to be responsive to a population health need. So we are really trying to move into a far more transparent space about how finance given in good faith is actually utilised in the system. So I hope that gives people reassurance. In the meantime, though, just good, constructive, positive conversations about how if resource was available to you, you would be able to significantly impact not only on future workforce pipeline, I would suggest, but future recruitment opportunities for organisations, but also, as Jax rightly says, the ability to then retain and maintain your workforce in the future. And the cost savings to an organisation of doing that well are significant. So hopefully through the work, we'll be able to furnish you with some of the really constructive conversation to have. And it's really important these conversations are done in the context of seeking the best for the population, as opposed to an adversarial scrap for the cash. So I think it's really important that we are really mindful about how we do this piece of unpicking so that we can create as much opportunity as possible. And you know, the learning from today and from the work that our evaluation partners have done is exquisite. It's how we then cleverly use that to craft arguments that help trusts really, really understand what's in it for them. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you, Beverly. I'm just aware of the time. I'm going to forego my slide because I think I've said enough, and I'm really keen to let Beverly have the floor for a few minutes just to finish off and round up. There are some, so Sharon, if you just that's it, thank you. In terms of the questions that are outstanding, I think we're going to ask you anyway to give us a little bit of feedback at the end using the chat box. So I think what we could do is myself and some of the colleagues that have been presenting today could go through some of these questions and fill them in. and answer them in the chat room if that's okay, rather than answering them now, just because I'm aware that we've only got a few minutes left till the end. But please get in touch with me if you would like to join the virtual platform, and then you can ask questions to your heart. We'll have the whole to answer them for you. So I hope that's okay, and I'm delighted to hand you over to Beverly. Before I do go, I'd just like to thank everybody today for their contribution. I think it's been beyond my expectations. It's been fantastic, and thank you, Beverly, for giving me the opportunity to lead on this project. So.
Thank you, Paula. Your leadership has been absolutely brilliant, my friend. And I think that clapping of 150 people clapping in many ways was directed at you and your leadership here. So thank you. You've held us all together and you've kept the faith through some really challenging times. So absolute credit, Paula, to you. Beautiful example of what a leadership fellowship can offer to people. So thank you, Paula, from bottom of my heart. Brilliant. Several other things to pay tribute to in all of this work is Laura Ledsford made the fatal error many moons ago now when we were doing the people plan, saying, now come on, Beverly, couldn't we just think about this differently? We've been talking in London and we think what we need to do is to create a group of people at a system level who can drive change here. And so, Laura, I can see you're lurking somewhere on the line. I just want to say to you, this is your genius playing out here, my friend. So fantastic leadership as ever, Laura, and thank you. And thank you for helping us to craft what Paula and the teams have crafted and to make something that is absolutely the opportunity to be, Nancy's words, the action room as opposed to the engine room of the ICS. And several people were quite interested in how does this relate to the AHP Council? How does this work? And I think there's no competition for space or limelight here. We have one job to do, which is to ensure that we make available to our populations a supply of fabulous AHPs in the right quantity, in the right places, at the right time, with the right skills, that choose to stay in these brilliant jobs for their entire professions and their whole professional life. So how can we as a group summate our value? And when I say that, I mean we need to have here 2 + 2 = about 8.5. Because actually to date, we haven't achieved that. What I've seen play through today is awesome summation of value, where we come together with the faculty as the absolutely poised as the action room of the AHP Council, working together to add value into that system. And all the things that Jack's challenged us with are absolutely right. It's wonderful to see the work that Karen and Irene and Jax have put together for us, because it takes the tablecloth off all the elephants that we have surrounding us in this work. And we can now say, look, we're not imagining it. It is real. And then how do we fill at these issues and move through? So I really want to pay tribute to the team for everything that is done and the amazing presentations by faculty leads. Thank you so much. You've done brilliant work in all adversity. And what we have seen is that for those of you who are able to keep going, the opportunity to become that absolute focus of attention on our precious supply pipeline is invaluable. So incredible, absolutely incredible. Highlight of my week, I have to say, hands down. So thank you. I also want to draw attention to the fact that there's so much work in this space at the moment that it is really important that we keep our dots joined on this. We have the incredible work that's coming out of the Clever Together Placements online workshop. That work is being analysed at the moment. You'll see David Marsden, every time he gets sniff of any of the outputs of that work, David is turning it into immediate action for us. And so we therefore have had a range of different presentations played through. You'll find them on David's Twitter account of opportunities to help you think differently about how, as a system with your HEI partners, you can think differently about how we do this work together. And it is, Suzanne challenged us, if you remember at the beginning, about this is about the 14 professions. And I absolutely respect the fact that we all start somewhere. But the real challenges for me is how can we make sure that we are paying as much attention to my paramedic colleagues who actually have a life way outside of ambulance services, but to help them get into the acute hospital setting, into primary care, we need to really work with those ambulance services constructively and helpfully to enable them to see a different world. We've got brilliant approaches from professions like orthoptics, very small, very mighty, and how we really help orthoptics to do their national allocation of placements, but being as enabling and supportive to BIOS, the professional body that run that, as possible. So we understand that our 14 uniquely different and beautiful professions probably all need a slightly different bit of handling. But actually, what we do is we build that expertise and that learning. And Jack's again challenged us about how could HE help? Well, the regional leads are exquisitely brilliant. It's my word of the day, exquisite. You can tell it's so appropriate in this environment. But they are brilliant at knowing the nuance of the patch. They've got the data. They are skilled in this. They see the picture across the region and the country. So go find your regional leads, make them your best friends, and work in partnership to again cement your value. And then at a regional level, it's how we pull together the faculties with regional leads to really drive that genius. And I can see that Naomi and David and others are popping things into the chat box for you about what's going on at the moment. So again, incredible. I've talked about the tariff. Jack's challenged us on leadership and national infrastructure. Well, we will work to continue. Many of you will know that we're trying to put some more resource into the regions so that you have some more resource and your regional colleagues have more resource so that we can have more tentacles of our octopus out there supporting you in practice. And you'll see Suzanne's leadership is incredible. The regional leads leadership is incredible. My other colleagues across the patch's leadership is incredible in how we stand nose to nose with the other professions and command our space. And the challenge for all of us is that's an exhausting and continuous occupation, but one that we must continue to do. And everything that we do is to ensure that we are seen to be as important, as valuable. We know we are. The world knows we are. It's just how we evidence that through our behaviours. And things like core metrics, etc., we will work on together. But you've got the Placement Accelerator Fund that closes on Friday. We're in the process of receiving the bids for the 5,000 extra student places in universities at the moment. Very exciting times around growth. We have the challenges of restart. And again, hats off to everybody's hard work around innovatively tackling the restart of clinical placements. And thank you for that. Suzanne's touched on the people plan, where in a very brief document, we're trying to put some foundations in place to give us the platform to drive this work. The work experience and the careers work is my final point to you. It is as important as ever. Vicky, I'm after you to talk virtual careers with Mary Claire and others who are active in that space so we can drive that and again share it together. But I think we've got careers work absolutely front and centre too at the moment because we're in clearing. We've got extra spaces in clearing this year because of government support for growth in the allied health professions. And I am delighted by the courage of the system putting forwards those growth numbers. Our job is to make sure we have people stacking up in their droves wanting to do these jobs. So there's a careers virtual event on the 25th of July. Anybody keen to be involved in that, let me know. We've just got to keep the momentum going together, hold the faith together, and today has been the most incredibly brilliant celebration, and that clapping was just brilliant, Paula. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Please stay connected to the work, and we're all here to help. The regional leads are absolutely poised as your go-to people to support in any way possible. So thank you. Well done, Paula. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beverly. Right, just before you leave, if you wouldn't mind, please, just so we get a little bit of feedback about, could you pop in the chat box what you're planning to do next, now that you have heard from these inspirational speakers today? And yeah, anything else, any other comments you'd like to leave us would be great. We'll leave this open for a little while, but I think what we're going to do is collate the questions and circulate them with the recording and the presentations, so it'll all come together as one package. But thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.